Welcome to Keep the Line Moving, the podcast where leadership meets life and inspiration. Here we spotlight extraordinary leaders. We're diving deep into how they inspire, motivate, and lead with strategy and empathy to achieve the extraordinary. Here we go. Episode 121. Today, we are putting a bow on the season that was. The NFL season of 2024-25, which saw the Philadelphia Eagles beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 59. We will get the full analysis from our guest, Erik Coleman, the 9-year NFL pro, my friend and former colleague at the New York Jets. We will talk about not just the X's and O's, although we'll talk a little bit about that, but it's diving deeper. What are the cultures that make up a winning team? For the Eagles, of course, in this sense. But we will also talk about two of his former teams, the Detroit Lions and the New York Jets, as we again say goodbye to the season that just passed and hello to the season that is coming, 2025, right? Today's the first day of the rest of your life. Well, today's the first day of the offseason for NFL teams. And you have to hear the advice Erik Coleman would give an incoming rookie to the NFL. The draft is in a few months, and I asked Erik, what advice would you give somebody entering the league? You have to hear this. It's applicable to anyone entering any job or industry. A wonderful conversation with my friend, Erik Coleman. All right, everybody, it's Erik Coleman. EC, it's great to see you. It's a great day because we get to talk about the Super Bowl and football, but it's a bad day because the NFL season's over. You and I both love it. It's great to see you, my friend.
It was great seeing you as well. When I saw your name pop across my phone, I was like, yeah, I get to go talk with my boy Chris. So I'm excited.
And let's start there. You've already been on the podcast, and I thank you very much for coming on again. You're one of those people as well, my friend. You just put a smile on my face, and it was wonderful working with you at the Jets. We've said that. I'll say it again, and I'll tell anyone. Erik, you look at the game yesterday. What is your main takeaway from Super Bowl 59?
Man, Chris, I'm not going to lie. I was a bit disappointed just the way the Eagles just took off. They did such a great job and had a great game plan for the Kansas City Chiefs that we haven't seen before. They're a team that was Vic Fangio, who was 0-8 against Patrick Mahomes in his career, was able to find a way to get to Mahomes without blitzing. He had some great coverages in there. Enforced a lot of turnovers. The offense for the Eagles was clicking early, and it seemed like the Kansas City Chiefs were the team that hadn't been there before. You would think that coming there, they had been to the Super Bowl, and they looked like a team that was nervous. They looked like a team that was uncomfortable. They were pressing, and the Eagles looked cool, calm, and collected the entire game. So, it was a great overall performance by the Eagles, both on defense, offensively, they did well, and they deserve to be the champions of the NFL.
Erik, you look at this. You grew up in Spokane, Washington. You went to Washington State, born in Sacramento. You grew up in football. You know the ins and outs and the fundamentals. I did not play as much, but I played a little bit, enough to know that the game is controlled on the line of scrimmage. And that's what happened in the Super Bowl. The line of scrimmage was dominated by the Philadelphia Eagles, which, to your great point, overwhelmed, from our vantage point as viewers, consumers, and people that love the sport, the offense of the Kansas City Chiefs, to your point, which is incredibly surprising, right?
It was surprising. I mean, for the Eagles to not blitz and for Josh Sweat to be all over Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes looked so uncomfortable back there. He was not able to get into rhythm. It was so bad where at the end of the first half, DeAndre Hopkins was open on a play, and it was as if he was so surprised that he was open that he just tripped. Because they did such a good job on the back end covering and creating pressure. But that Eagles defense, they were one of the top defenses in the NFL. I think the top defense in the NFL all season long. So they've been playing some great complementary football. And for them to come out with a dominant performance when it counted, man, that meant a lot. So shout out to Vic Fangio and that defense. And I mean, the Eagles just really outperformed Andy Reid, which you've never seen. You've never seen Andy Reid get outcoached, and we saw it yesterday.
Very good point. And you and I talked before hitting record in that Saquon Barkley did not have a great game. He had that one catch that was amazing that he hung on there down near the goal line. My point is this, though. He still had an impact, right? He had an impact for the entire season and arguably could be the MVP. Tell me your thoughts on his impact in the Super Bowl, maybe something we as fans didn't see, but you as a former player probably did see.
Yeah, well, Saquon wasn't very effective running the football, and that's okay. He is, but the thing about Saquon is he's such a distraction that I guarantee you the entire week, the entire 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl, the Chiefs were worried about stopping number 26 because you can't, as a defense, you can't have running backs running the football down the middle of your defense because what that does, it opens up the entire playbook. And fortunately for the Eagles, they got out to a great jump on defense. They put some points on the board. They were able to take some shots down the field and create some big plays. And it was almost as if they didn't need Saquon to run the football well. And yes, he can hand it off to him. He can get 4 yards, and that defense still has to honor every fake. They have to honor everything that comes with giving it to Saquon. So it really freed up the receivers out on the perimeter. You saw A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith making big catches. That's all because you had to put an extra man in the box to focus on number 26. Because if he got rolling, the Chiefs were in trouble. So I thought he had a huge impact on the game, even though he didn't have as many rushing yards.
Great point. So, Erik, let's look at this. Howie Roseman is the executive for the Eagles. He's been there 25 years, and they won, most recently the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. Peterson is the coach. Now Sirianni, Saquon, Hurts, everybody now, the cast is different, but they keep on winning. They're perpetuating a culture with Lurie, the owner, and such that is working. How do you look at that? How do you look at how they continually are in the fight in the NFC and now reached the ultimate goal, winning the Super Bowl?
Well, I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Howie Roseman and the Eagles organization. They do a great job of creating a consistent atmosphere for the players, for the coaches. It's not one of those organizations that's hiring and firing guys every year. Cutting guys. They give guys an opportunity to grow. They create a team atmosphere, and when they need a position, they need something. He's not afraid to make a move and go out and get it. They got A.J. Brown a couple of years ago when they needed a big playmaker. They drafted Devontae Smith. They got the pass rushers on defense because he knows they have to dominate the line of scrimmage because that's how you win playoff football and defense wins championships. So he invested a lot into that defense. This last year, he drafted a cornerback in the first round. He drafted Cooper DeJean, who had a big impact on the game yesterday. And the defensive line for the Eagles has been phenomenal for the last couple of years. So I think that the consistency, there's not a lot of continuity there. So you can trust that you can make a mistake, but this team is going to grow together. When you see those organizations that are always in the hunt for the Super Bowl, the Baltimore Ravens, in the past, the New England Patriots, the Steelers, these organizations have a lot of there's a lot of trust from up top. There's a lot of consistency there, and they're not quick to jump the gun. So I think that's one of the key factors for the Eagles. They trust in their process, and they trust in the coaches and the players to do their job.
And we talk about this a lot on the podcast, Erik. And a couple of weeks ago, I did something on organizational culture, and because I know you're an avid fan of the podcast, we talk about culture all the time and leadership, right? And you've talked about when you were on, you talked about the impact Herm Edwards had on the culture of the Jets back in the day when you played for Herm. You mentioned an interesting word there in trust. Could you expand on that? What do you mean? Like when the people walk in the building, they know that they can trust the process. What do you see as the process for the Eagles? And with all due respect to Kansas City, for goodness sakes, they win all the time, and their culture is as solid as they come. But however, we're talking about the Eagles. Let's give them their credit. They just won. What do you mean by that trust? Because I think that's really interesting.
Well, when I talk about trust, I talk about when you're the general manager, you hire a head coach and you allow him to do his job. The head coach, he's going to hire a defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, and he's not going to be over their shoulder questioning every move that they make. He's going to hire these people. He's going to delegate responsibility and put trust in the scheme that these coaches have. He's going to put trust in the players that they're going to make the play when their number's called. Look at that offensive line for the Eagles. They get a guy like Mekhi Becton, who was a first round draft pick for the Jets, who wasn't able to find a home. He wasn't find success with the Jets, but he plugged him in at guard. They plugged him in at guard, and he had a process. He had a process that he was going to follow. He continued to grow, and then all of a sudden, now you see the Eagles' offensive line is a unit. You know, one of the best offensive lines we've seen in a long time, and they trusted that this kid was going to follow the process, he was going to put in the work, and he was going to become a part of that unit. You know, you didn't hear about his weight issues, you didn't hear about injuries, you didn't hear about any of that stuff because he had the guys around him to set the example, and he kind of fell into place. And when you have great leadership, when you have trust in your players, when you have trust in your coaches, guys tend to just fall into place, and there's not a lot of nitpicking that you have to do or babysitting that you have to do for these players. The leadership of the team handles that responsibility.
And Sirianni, the coach, took a step back from calling plays and such, right? They hired two new coordinators and they allowed them, to your great point, to do their job, which is to call the plays. But Sirianni had a role. He was able to, and I don't like the word manage, but I'm going to use it anyway, manage the entire operation, right? Function as the CEO as the coach. In other words, that could be to some other coaches an ego blow. I'm not calling plays. I'm not involved intimately in the decisions on a, minute by minute, second by second basis. So that goes to your point about trust. How do you think he did as a coach, rebounding from that unexplained, letdown at the end of the 23 season?
Yeah, I thought Sirianni really matured. You know, you saw in the last couple of years, you know, him yelling at fans, him kind of being emotional about his decisions and wearing his emotions on his sleeve. I think he's grown up in the past few years. You saw the adversity that the Eagles went through with, you know, from AJ Brown to calling out Jalen Hurts and, you know, Brandon Graham putting it out in the media. And what happened was he trusted that his players were going to, the leaders in that locker room were going to come together. They were going to believe in each other, and they were going to get through the adversity. It wasn't a lot of, you know, you didn't hear a lot of Sirianni talking about things in the media. He trusted that his leadership would step up, and they did. You know, ultimately, this team came together. You saw their true colors when they played in the Super Bowl. They were hugging each other. They bonded at the right time, and they started playing good football at the right time. And it was all because the team didn't break. Yes, they had their problems, they had their issues, but they had the talent in the locker room. They had to get focused on the job and the task at hand, and they really did lock in when you got into the playoffs and when it counted. You know, got to give them a lot of credit for having that trust in the leadership of the players in that locker room.
Did you see the Eagles coming, Eric? Did you see them coming, let's just say a month ago, 3 weeks ago? Did you see this coming together with the Saquon effect? And you brought up the great point about Becton. And he was in tears on the field after winning. He's so appreciative of the situation he's now in. But aside from those two examples, did you see as a team the Eagles coming?
I did. I always thought that they had a chance because you have, we talked about it earlier, Chris. They dominate the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. You look on defensive side of the ball, Jalen Carter. You look at Sweat. You look at Brandon Graham. They dominate on the defensive line of scrimmage. They play in the other team's backfield. I mean, this offensive line really does maul opposing defenses. And you saw that in the stats. Saquon Barkley, when he was with the Giants, you know, his first impact was 1.2 yards after he got the ball. When he came to the Eagles, I think it was around 3 yards before anyone was touching Saquon. So when you give a guy like that a full head of steam and the creativity and the athleticism that he has, he's going to make a big play 9 times out of 10. And he did that for the team all year. And when you see that throughout the season, consistently that offensive line dominating opposing defenses and the defensive line of the Eagles, you know, creating havoc, getting to the backfield, uh, putting a lot of pressure on defenses, on offenses. Yeah, that's the key. That's the recipe for success. Playing great defense, running the football, and then Jalen Hurts doesn't have everything on his shoulders. He can go out there and play complementary football. So they really did have a great recipe for success. And I'm not saying that I was, one of the people that was like, oh, the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl because the Detroit Lions, they were playing great football. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the Ravens. Any of those teams could have won this championship, but the Eagles clicked at the right time, and that's why they're the one team that's celebrating at the end of the year.
So you played for the Falcons, the Jets, and the Lions. You just mentioned the Lions. How has Dan Campbell transformed that team so quickly into what they are now?
Oh man, it's special the way Dan Campbell has changed that team. I think that he got a lot of players in the locker room that were leaders, that were hard workers, and you kind of sift out the fakers, the guys who are there for the paycheck. And when you have a bunch of leadership, when you have great players who care about the game, who care about one another, it just shines because they have the talent as well. So you add that talent with the hard work ethic, the leadership. I mean, that's a recipe for success, and it's really exciting to see because when I played for the Lions, my second to last year back in 2011, I tell people all the time that was the most talented team I've ever played on, but the leadership wasn't there. The trust wasn't there. Guys were selfish. They were looking out for they were looking out for themselves as opposed to playing for their teammate. And so Dan Campbell coming there as a former player, as a hard worker, as a guy who had to grind to get it. I think him adding that attitude the Lions had was a recipe for success.
So let me ask you, if some of the players that you played with and some of the coaches that you were able to play under, how do you impact somebody in a positive way? Dan Campbell is a very emotional guy, but that's what we see, right? We see that in the speeches and such. But what is Dan Campbell doing, in your opinion, behind closed doors that is showing that he cares about play? I know you're not there, but how, in your opinion, does a coach show that, I truly care about this connection, this team, and how we're working and doing the job?
I think you do that by showing interest in each player individually and by challenging those players individually. Challenging the great players to consistently play great football, and the great players to bring a guy who's not as good to step back and bring one of those good players up to his level and create a level of acceptance that everyone in this locker room is going to play to this standard. We're going to work hard. We're going to study. We're going to play tough, hard-nosed football. And if you can get the great guys on your team to buy into that, everyone else falls into place. When you have the leadership that buys in to what the coach has, when the top producers, when the top people, the top dogs in that locker room, when they buy into your message, I think that's the key to creating a successful atmosphere.
Okay, so let's talk about another one of your former teams, the New York Jets. They just hired Aaron Glenn, and they have Muji as the GM, Darren Muji. So those two together now are taking the reins of the Jets. Your thoughts on the coaching style of Aaron Glenn? He's never been a head coach. However, we've seen him in high-profile situations, most recently with the Lions, your other former team. So you're very familiar, right? And you two overlapped career-wise. I'm not entirely certain you played together, but you know the gentleman. Tell me about what you anticipate from Coach Glenn.
Well, I think that Coach Glenn comes from the old school. He comes from, the same school of thought that Dan Campbell comes from, where it's going to be tough, it's going to be physical. That's the way that you win. You play smart football. That's the way that you win. And I'm excited because Aaron Glenn, not only has he had success on his own as a defensive coordinator, but he was a big part of the success of the Detroit Lions, transferring from a team that was an organization that was mediocre, that had flashes of brilliance, to a team that's been consistently good since Dan Campbell got there. And I'm excited for him to come to the Jets and change the culture over there because that's all that's needed. When you look at the Jets roster, there's talent everywhere. It's just the attitude. It's the culture that needs to change in the leadership. And I think that Aaron Glenn is a guy who's done it before at a high level. He's well respected. When you see him on the sideline of the Lions, it was like offensive players, it was defensive players. Everyone came up to Aaron Glenn because they all respected him and they looked up to him. That's what I look in for a head coach. A guy who all the players gravitate to. They want to perform for, and they want to run through a wall for. And I think Aaron Glenn has all those characteristics, as well as the knowledge of the game. He's played at a high level. He's a Pro Bowl player. It's really just everything that you are looking for in a head coach. So I'm excited for him. I did miss him. I played with his brother Jason when I was a rookie, but I have a lot of respect for that family. I know he went to Texas A&M, and that's a good tradition right there. So he's a Jet. He's a true Jet, and I think he's going to bring the organization back to prominence.
And you saw recently that the Aaron Rodgers news came out that he was not going to be part of the plan going forward. Did that surprise you?
It did surprise me. I thought that Aaron gives you an opportunity to have a leader, a guy who has done it before, and raise a young quarterback behind him. When you have a new head coach, a lot of times you don't want to rebuild, you don't want to start all over, and so having Aaron Rodgers there gives you an opportunity to be in the fight. And so from that sense, I was surprised. But on the other end, people organizations don't like distractions, and a lot of times, whether it was warranted or not, Aaron is a big personality, and he does create some distractions, and maybe that's not what Aaron wanted for his locker room. Maybe he wanted to start over and him be the attention getter and the guy who provided that leadership in the locker room.
Do you like this time of year where everything, remember, as an NFL player, everything is equal? Everyone's 0-0. How did you always approach that yourself? When you would come into the offseason and take step one on this day, what would you do? How would you approach your preparation for the upcoming season?
I would I would self-evaluate. I would look at myself and look at the strengths and the weaknesses, some of the things that I wanted to work on in the off season. But I always saw it, no matter how successful my season was, I looked at it as if there's a bunch of guys around the world that are fighting for my position, and I have to do whatever it takes to maintain that spot or to gain that spot. So I'm not just out working the guys in my workout group or some people that I know. I'm out working somebody who's in their backyard or at their high school, grinding, putting in the work, lifting weights, doing everything that it takes, so they're ready. So it was kind of a mental game, and it was an opportunity for me to create separation from my competition. And I know that a lot of guys aren't taking it as seriously right now. They might be vacationing, they might be hanging out, but I thought that would be that time right there when you get into late February. That was my time to start the separation process.
Pete Carroll, my other former team, and my former teams are the Jets and the Raiders. Pete Carroll hired as the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. What was your first thought? What is your thought now that it's sunk in for a couple weeks?
I love it. Pete Carroll, he was one of those guys that you want to play for. He's a guy he's a raw guy, but it's not in a tacky way. It's in a way that guys really want to play for him. And yes, he has the expertise and the knowledge of the game, and he really does create stars. When you look at those Seattle teams, the Legion of Boom, from Marshawn Lynch to all the players that went through that organization, he creates a lot of stars, and he lets guys be themselves. And I think that that's something that the Raiders need. Now, yes, they need some star power, but they play in an environment where they need to play with that confidence, that swagger. And Pete Carroll's a guy who allows guys to do that. So, I wish the best for him.
And speaking of Marshawn, he went to the press conference. That was impressive, yelling out Raiders. Remember that? That was
I
fantastic.
loved it. I loved it. He's such a big personality, and he loves Pete Carroll, and he loves his Raiders. He's from East Oakland, and yes, they're in Las Vegas now, but everyone in the Bay Area is still they still love their Raiders, so that's not going to stop.
Yes, I thought that was fantastic. Okay, my friend, here we go. All-star moments, quick thought, first thought, best thought, and then we'll call it a day. And I really appreciate you coming on. Here we go. We will get to all-star moments in just a second. To grow as a leader, you must make intentional choices about how you want to show up for yourself and your team. Are you ready to grow your leadership? The Gargano Leadership Group offers expert coaching, consulting, and workshops rooted in our 4 leadership pillars: curiosity, alignment, optimism, and self-awareness. Leadership starts with forging authentic connections, communicating your values, leading with energy and enthusiasm, and truly understanding yourself. Visit garganoleadership.com to get started with us today. Back to the show. Right now, as we sit here in, almost mid-February, your 2025 AFC favorite team is?
I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens.
Okay.
I thought they were very impressive last year. The way they ran the football, the way they played defense. Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. That combination was a deadly one. So I think they're only going to get better, and I think that next year they're going to have a shot.
Got it. Derrick Henry is so impressive. That guy just gets better with age. Okay, same question. NFC, your favorite right now.
NFC, my favorite. I'm going to say I got to go with the Detroit Lions. You know, they're going to have Hutchinson back. You know, on that defensive line, they're going to be hungry as ever. You know, that whole team is probably working out right now, just frustrated at the fact that they didn't make it to the Super Bowl and leave the season with that Lombardi. So I think the Detroit Lions are going to be motivated and one of the top teams.
Fantastic. Okay, here's a question for you, Erik. Right now, which NFL coach, and no disrespect to your former teams, which NFL coach would you want to play for?
You know, I'm like one of those strap them up, you know, tighten up the pads, physical guys. So I think Mike Tomlin. You know, Mike Tomlin, he coaches with an edge, and he's one of those guys that he loves physicality, and that's my brand of football. So I think I would fit in well with Mike Tomlin.
That would be fun to be a Steeler. Absolutely. Okay, what advice would you give to a rookie coming into the NFL right now?
The advice I'd give to a rookie nowadays would be get rid of the distractions. You have a small amount of time to have success in this league, and if you get rid of the distractions, you lock in and focus on what's important, which is playing the game of football. Then you can make a great career for yourself. Get rid of the I guess the entourages. Get rid of the endorsement. I'm not saying you can't go make money, but don't let it be a distraction. Remember why you're here, and that's to play football, to be a great teammate, to be a great player. Lock in, take care of your body, take care of yourself mentally and physically, and that's going to be the great. I guess that's going to lead to a great career.
That's great advice. And then the perspective here is you know, we get older. I'm way older than you, but as we get older, we realize that it's such a small part of your life that you're given this privilege and this, you know, you've worked for it, but you're in this wonderful league and playing with these people. It's so true. You got to take advantage of it, right?
You do.
Erik, thank you very much. This is wonderful.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
And we thank Erik very much for coming on the show. I have one takeaway I want to focus on, and that is what Erik said, the advice he would give to an incoming rookie, which is to eliminate distractions and how important that is. And I'm so glad that he brought it up. We talk about it all the time in our workshops and in my classes at NYU, which is one's ability to focus. The other side of eliminating distractions, right? That's over here, is then your ability to focus, right? Understanding that we have a finite amount of time to learn, right? In given situations. You don't know the meeting where you're going to hear something that is really going to change the way you do business, right? Either on the football field or in corporate or in a classroom situation. So that's why I always tell the students, and Erik said it there, which is to focus and take notes. And I know I sound old-fashioned. That's okay. And understanding that you never know where or who will deliver that nugget of information that will give you an advantage or an edge or trigger a thought to allow you to be better than you were before you entered the meeting or the situation or even a casual conversation. I'm so glad that Erik brought that up. And I'm so glad you're with us each and every week, everybody. We'll see you Friday for KTLM Extras. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a great week. Thanks for tuning in to Keep the Line Moving. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Most importantly, share this podcast with your friends, family, and coworkers. It means the world to us. If you have a guest recommendation, visit our website at garganoleadership.com, where you'll also find all our archived episodes. For our marketing coordinator and the producer of this podcast, Savin Narwhal, I'm Chris Gargano. Have a fantastic week, everybody.